Hamas leader, he said, it's very interesting actually. He said, I have no problem with the Jews.
Okay.
He said, we lived with you for thousands of years, for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
He said, if my own brother was to steal my land, I would fight him.
Do I want a Sharia state potentially inheriting Israel's nukes, which is, in a one-state solution, one permutation?
Well, I think you should hope for that. You know why?
Please don't say
I'll tell you why you should hope for that.
Why should I hope for
Because
that?
in the Sharia, these type of weaponry is not permissible to be used. The deliberate targeting of innocent people is not permissible in Islam. This concept that we're being programmed to think that Iran wants to get nuclear weapons because it wants to destroy Israel is nonsense.
But if I'm Israeli, I'm going, yeah, but the problem is Iran is a theocracy, and these guys, they're not worried about the material survival. What they're worried about is their eternal survival of the soul.
But you know,
and if they think it's divine covenant that they're supposed to do it,
I know, but unfortunately,
and there will be people who might, and that's a legitimate concern.
Unfortunately, Israel believes all sorts of things. Well, I think if anybody now supports Israel, I think they fall into two camps. Either they are willfully ignorant of what's happening through choice, because there's too much evidence and information out there to still remain ignorant. So you're either ignorant by choice or you are a racist.
I'm in a third category.
Because what would be the third category?
Well, I hope I'm not racist. Maybe I'm ignorant. You can explain to me how. My argument for the existence of the State of Israel now. I've said this, if you don't mind, I've said this on a few channels, but with yours we actually get the airtime, so if you don't mind reiterating certain points. I don't know much about this conflict. I don't claim to be an expert, okay? People like Finkelstein know much more. With my limited understanding of the arguments I hear from Israel, I hear four bad arguments. I hear the argument God gave us the land, and I go, this is unconvincing because we need to forge international laws. You can't forge international laws based on different tribes going, my God said do it, yeah? It doesn't mean your God didn't give you the land, it just means that international courts can't bring that into the equation. Is that reasonable?
Yeah, I think it also sets a very bad precedent, because then other people can say, well, my book says that's illegal.
Exactly.
That's wrong, that's immoral.
Yeah. So it just fragments the argument. So
absolutely.
It's not pragmatic in international law.
Yeah.
So if the goal is international law with equanimity for everyone, we can kill the God argument.
Well, I think that for Muslims and for Jews, I would say, that their sense of morality, i.e. their sense of morality comes from their religion. However, as I said, within the framework of Islam, there is a framework already that exists.
Sure.
That despite something being wrong, that if war can be prevented, even if it means that you accept certain terms that are actually detrimental, then if you can avoid war, then you avoid it. That's that's the preferred route.
Okay, it's a good aspiration.
So for us, actually, we don't have to sidetrack or move away from our religion. Those teachings are already within the religion.
Well, Abbas, with respect, for the minute, I'm looking at the arguments I hear from Israel. Yeah. And I'm rejecting them one by one.
That's fine.
And I'm trying to give cogent, objective reasons. Not because I'm partisan.
That's fine.
Okay? I think the God argument is untenable. I'm not disproving God with that. God may or may not.
I understand.
I'm just saying it's not applicable in international law.
Yeah.
The next argument I hear with Netanyahu and Shapiro in their videos, they say we have to go back 3,000 years to understand the conflict. I reject that.
Exactly.
And I'll come back to that, because that's
nonsense.
That's the one to come back to, because it's more difficult to reject.
Well, not only that, but it's utter nonsense, because the Palestinian people, Harvard University did a DNA study, and they found that the Palestinian people have 50, 60, up to 70% DNA of the Canaanite people that were there like thousands of years ago.
Now, so he would disagree.
You know what I mean?
He would disagree.
What would you disagree on?
I disagree not with the fact you're giving me, but with its relevance. I just don't.
No. My point is that the reason why it's relevant is if somebody brings an argument that my people were here for thousands of years, the assumption is that your people were not.
No, I hear you.
You understand?
I hear you.
So it just counters that
okay,
argument.
but my objection to that argument is, no, we can't do international law if we have to rewind history
Thousands of
3,000
years.
years again.
Yeah.
And I'd like to come back to that point because it's the only point I think deserves further investigation. The third argument that they use is that we've improved the land.
Yeah.
They go, we turned up and before this was a barren wasteland, and then we pushed out some Palestinians and we've turned it into a haven, okay?
Yeah.
And I'm going, that's got no ethical basis.
No,
mate.
of course
Because
not.
that's like saying, if you have a car and you buy it
Yeah.
and then you don't polish it,
Yeah.
I don't get to come by, nick your car and go,
I polished
better
it, so
than
I
you,
get to
okay?
keep it. Yeah, obviously.
Okay, so when you buy a car, that includes the option to not polish the
or if I
damn
nick
thing.
your garden and then go and plant some flowers in there, and they say, "Well, I planted some flowers. Now it's my garden."
Okay, so we don't need to waste time with
It's just
that.
a silly argument.
And there's another argument I hear, which is, well, the people of Palestine have never formally been a people. And I'm like, I don't care. If I'm walking down the street and I get mugged, my rights as the offence against me is just as legitimate, whether or not I'm a member, I've got a passport or something.
Absolutely.
Okay? It's a basic
and
human right.
and there's contention to that argument anyway, but I'm just saying from your point, even if you were to make that argument, it's just stupid.
Yeah. So those are four arguments, three of which are totally factuous.
Yeah.
To return to the one, though, about 3,000 years.
So if I could just touch on that last argument.
Go on.
In the same way that we don't legitimize the Americans, or not the Americans, because they would have been Europeans, that went and stole the land from the indigenous populations of Australia and America, we recognize those were great injustices.
Yeah.
In the same way, and of course, America has done amazing things, right? New York City, LA, right?
That doesn't let you off the hook.
It doesn't let you off
all
the hook.
you're doing is serving your own interests anyway.
Exactly.
You don't get brownie points for going, hey, I made myself nice meals afterwards.
It doesn't legitimize the theft or the persecution or the slaughter that you did. So in the same way here, I agree.
So those were four bullshit arguments, except the second one about 3,000 years.
Yeah.
Although that's bullshit, it does raise the topic of the statute of limitations.
Yes.
Okay? And I don't. Hopefully we can agree. We can't rewind history 3,000 years in all directions to work out conflicts. It would be insane.
Well, because the problem then you have is that is there a point where you say this is going to be the cutoff point?
Well, this is what we need to
because
do.
Is it 5,000 years?
Right.
Is it 10,000 years?
Exactly.
You know, where do you go with
So
this?
my mission now is to encourage people to focus on the statute of limitations, have a serious discussion, because it pertains to Israel-Palestine, it pertains to reparations for black people, slavery, all of these issues which you will encounter in all global arenas. Go, what is the statute of limitations on something, yeah? And if we can collectively have a conversation about that and hammer out something which is applicable in international law,
I think it's already been done.
Well, what have you got? It's not 3,000 years.
Well, no, but we have already a legal framework that has global consensus that Israel, and by the way, this is how the voting is quite apparent, in fact, and shows that there is a global consensus that Israel has to move back to the 1967 borders, has to give back all of the occupied lands, and allow the Palestinian people to govern all of their land as they please.
You've just reframed the question back into the specific Israel-Palestine. The question I'm trying to focus on is more abstract and universal than that. Genuinely, in international law, for all jurisdictions, how should we draw this line? A line needs drawing. We need to define an objective.
But there isn't that line.
Statute.
That line for most people is that post United Nations or the consensus of the global community to enter into treaties and agreements that we would no longer. So we can see that there were lots of injustices done. We can see there was an age of empires. You know, you had the Christian empires, you had the Muslim empires. The Persians, the Romans, we all had our empires. And we saw that would potentially lead to an endless global
So you're saying,
war.
hang on, then I think you're saying basically it's post-45.
Yes, the 40, 46, 47,
okay,
the United Nations.
That doesn't answer the question of statute of limitations, because if we imagine 100 years from now, I'm asking the same question. What's the statute of limitations? You're not going to say it's 1945 if I ask you the question in 150 years from now. I'm asking, if a crime is committed, how long in the past does it have to go before we go?
Well, I would argue that the reason why I'm arguing when the United Nations was formed.
It's a good line. It just doesn't actually address...
No, but there's a reason why I'm saying that. The reason why I'm saying that is that now you have a globe that has formally, legally, with witnesses, has agreed.
I get it. It's a good line. I
You understand
appreciate
my point?
the point you're bringing to the table.
Now, before that, one could argue, well, we didn't have this agreement. So, the reason why the Second World War happened, or the First World War happened, or the Persians, or the Romans, or the Islamic empires, or whatever it might be, it was the age of empires. Might was right. Okay? And since the United Nations, we said, no, actually, might is not right. Let's all of us get together, come up with, and by the way, I do have my criticisms of...
Oh, I see what you're saying. Hang on. No, seriously, I hadn't considered the answer.
Do you see my point?
You're saying that a new world order was announced in 1945.
We had a consensus.
So as of 1945, history goes back forever. So even 3,000 years in the future...
Yes.
We would argue when we're adjudicating...
We had a global agreement, yes.
So we're going to rewind 3,000
years.
Yes,
because we have a document now. We have a consensus. We have a signed document. Now, what I am saying, however, I give a caveat, though.
Thank you. I hadn't considered that.
So one of the things that upsets me about the United Nations is that, unfortunately, what it appears is that now, as the years have gone on, it becomes a European and American tool to effectively impose governance on the world to its wishes, and in fact, the whole point, or the very ethical, moral, let's say, concept of what it should have been.
Yeah.
Which is that it should have been not 5 permanent members.
Sure.
That can say yay or nay, and end up controlling effectively the world.
We agree, it's biased.
So it's biased.
It's weighted in terms of...
It's weighted with the European ethnocentric...
So we need to change that.
We need to change that.
Okay, that's fine.
And we need to...
But nonetheless, thereafter, you're saying as of 45, once you've rinsed out the imbalance...
Once you have a globe... So as a Muslim...
And then you just rewind history forever.
So as a Muslim, if I'm a leader of a land, and I have a treaty with somebody... It is incumbent upon me not to break that treaty. In Islam, you're not allowed to do what's called treachery. I can't say, Tony, I'm not going to attack you. I want peace with you. And you say to me, Abbas, I'm not going to attack you. I want peace with you. And then secretly, I plot behind your back and I attack you. This is haram in Islam.
Okay, I get it.
It's forbidden. And I think there's an ethical, moral...
I've got to bounce back on your line. I've drawn a different model. But it's a question that needs asking. You've drawn a new line I hadn't thought of. I want to explore it. So, according to how does your ethic then deal with a situation where if I steal your car now, and I've got it, and 150 years down the line, my great-grandson's got the car, and your great-grandson goes up to that person, they get the car back, do they?
Well, because now there's a legal framework in place that was already in place. Your great-great-grandfather and my great-great-grandfather told one another that we're not going to steal from one another. And if I steal from you or you steal from me, that property is going to be mine regardless of time.
So we have
So now we have a legal framework. We have a legal framework in place that we can now go to. It becomes less ambiguous. It becomes less subjective. We have a document that my great-grandson can produce and say, hold on a second, your great-grandfather who owned the vehicle, or my great-grandfather who owned the vehicle, had an agreement with your great-grandfather that vehicle would not be stolen, and if you did steal it, I would get it back. Now I can go to the international court, and I can say, I have an agreement in place, I have property rights in place. Now, since we have consensus in agreement, I have a legal framework now. And yes, the matter can be dealt with. And so similarly now, if you own the deeds of your property, and in 1,000 years, somebody has stolen your property, they still have a right because they're holding the deeds of your property.
I love that what you've done is you tried to draw a clear, objective line, and you have.
Right.
You've said we drew a legitimate new world order.
We have now an agreement
on a particular year. It's kind of year zero.
Yeah.
And from this point onwards, we can map all chains of cause and
That's
effect. Yeah. Hopefully, you'll concede that at a pragmatic level, as we move further and further into the future, the ability to accurately map all of those chains will
And if there are disagreements...
and they will become increasingly complicated and difficult to keep track of.
Right, but if there are disagreements in the future, but hold on, before 1945 happened, and this happened, this well was on this side or whatever, but we want to take water out from there, whatever it might be, then there should be impartial, voting with honesty and with integrity, not looking at this is my ally, and because I'm corrupt and because he's corrupt, that I'm going to vote for him and I'm going to make sure he gets the well or No, we should have a fair system.
You should.
Where if everybody agrees that we're going to go with global consensus,
we need to do that. Definitely.
Right? The matter will be held in the ICC, wherever it might be, the International Court, and we'll agree to its outcome. And if everybody has agreed a framework in place, then we stick to that.
Okay. That is definitely an ideal
The problem that we have now, though, is the United Nations is hijacked by America.
We got it.
You know what I mean?
We got it. We're agreeing.
And the United Nations actually is the US nation.
Yeah, no, it's for
it's a corrupt organization. Yeah.
So you tilt the balance back to equanimity within the international courts and the UN.
Yeah.
Then you move forward like this. I've drawn a different conclusion. I like your one because it's objective. What I can't do is people who go, we're going to go back 3,000 years. And I go, why pick that? Why not 2,000 years? Why not 5,000 years? It's an arbitrary number. You've actually defined a line which is objective, although it's a cultural and historical accident. World War II was so significant. I can say, okay, 45, I like it. I've been playing with the idea that the statute of limitation should be within the lifetime of the individual. And thereafter you move on. So if the individual has committed a crime during their life, as long as they're alive, they're answerable. And if the individual suffered a loss during their life, they're open to compensation. Thereafter, we go, it's become history.
The problem with that, you see, the problem with that, Tony, is that...
Can you, before giving me the problem, I'm happy to hear the problem.
Sure.
Can you concede that it's got the merit of objectively, it's very easy to quantify if someone's alive or dead?
It
creates an objective
It may
line.
be a clear way of making a decision on a matter, but I don't believe it would be just, and I'll tell you why.
Go on.
And the reason why it won't be just is it has within it an incentive now that as long as I hold on to this theft for long enough, it will be legitimized.
Well, no, I will always be culpable for the theft. I will never be able to get away from that.
So even 10 generations afterwards...
No, that's other people. I'm responsible for my choices.
No, I understand.
God, Once I'm dead, God's judged me. While I'm alive, I'm
I understand. But
if I ever steal your car, as long as I'm alive, I'm answerable.
Yes.
And if you ever have your car stolen, as long as you're alive, you're entitled to have it back.
Yeah, but the reason why...
I understand. We're alive or dead.
I understand. But the reason why I believe that would inherently... end up in injustices is that the aggressor then knows that all he has to do is hang on to the thing that he has stolen. So he dies and he manages to give it to his child or his generation, and now it becomes legitimized.
I see your point.
And what I'm saying is that if you have a legal framework and document in place and an agreement in place, that it takes away the incentive now that even if you hold on to it for 10 generations, you're still going to lose it because it was fundamentally illegal to start with.
Okay, Abbas, this is why I wanted to have discussions like this. I hadn't considered your option. I actually think your one pragmatically is even more ambitious and idealistic than mine. I think mine, in any given time scale, you can always go, who's alive, who's dead, work it out. You're responsible for your choices. You're not responsible for other people's choices. I think it has that ethical foundation. I take your point about the counter argument, which is you might go, if I can hang on to it for 80 years.
Exactly. Then it becomes mine.
Okay, but I mean, well, no, it doesn't. It becomes my other people's. Because as long as I'm alive, hang on. It doesn't become mine if I own it for 80 years. Yeah. As long as I'm alive, I have to give it back.
But you see,
I can give it to somebody else.
But you see, look, the occupation of Palestine at the moment, these people who are occupying it, they know they're not going to occupy it forever. They know they're going to die.
Yeah.
But they know that the occupation will extend beyond their life.
Yes.
To the generations they come.
If they're thinking generationally
you see what I mean?
And tribally, there's actually a problem.
So what I'm saying is that your solution does not counter what we are fundamentally seeing happening today.
I'm not suggesting that I'm suggesting a two-tier ethics. Primary ethics concerns whether you're alive or dead. Secondary ethics are then the facts to do with all of the other consequences,
Yeah.
which you can't ignore.
Yeah.
But when primary ethics and secondary ethics come in conflict, in other words, where the matter of if you're alive is in conflict with someone who's dead, the living person wins. Yeah? As long as that two-tier ethics for adjudicating things, I think would work. I'm not suggesting you ignore history. I'm not suggesting reparations isn't something to be discussed or that there weren't slaves and the American economy didn't gain from it. I'm just going, you have to draw lines somewhere.
Yeah, I know.
If you were a slave, there's no question
I understand,
you should get
but
compensation.
the problem is, when there's no consequences, because if you are strong, like America,
Well,
what I'm saying is that if you are truly a strong brute,
yeah.
then there are going to be clearly less consequences for yourself than if you're one of the weak. And if you perceive that your empire
Okay.
is going to outlast your generation, then I'm just saying that
I see your point. It's a very good point.
There's no
My bounce back
ethical or even pragmatic reason, or even realistic, deterrent to not carry out the sort of things that we're seeing.
Yeah,
in
I hear you.
Palestine.
I think my bounce back on that, and it doesn't mean I'm refuting your point because your point has real weight, is that I think you're framing it at the political level and I'm framing it at the level of the individual, okay? So you're talking about how entire tribes might behave to do land grabs if they had the power advantage, and you're right. I was trying to ground it at the level of the individual's ethics, yeah? No individual gains from this. If I steal something, I'm hunted for the rest of my life, yeah? So at the level of the individual, it plays
I understand
out pretty
your
well.
argument. I understand your argument.
They're both, at least they're both objective frameworks.
I understand your argument. But Tony, I've got a question for you.
Go.
This support for Israel that we are seeing, especially within our media, our governments in Europe and America, my take on it is that I just feel that this has to be racism, because what the legal framework inherently is racist. It's an apartheid system. It's a supremacist system that we're seeing in Israel, because there is one law for the Jew and another law for the Palestinian. So the Palestinian, despite even being able to prove that he has been there generationally, if he's been evicted from that land, he has no right to return. And a Jew that doesn't even have to prove that has ever existed in the state of Palestine has a right to have that land.
Yeah.
It's inherently racist. So my point to you is, what is your take on this support that we are seeing within the media, within certain, especially right-wing Christian politics and and Christians and Westerners, basically?
Yeah.
Where do you think this excessive, almost blind support for Israel comes from? Where do you think that comes from?
Sorry, just 1 second. Well, I'm not sure it's as pervasive as you're breaking out at the moment. It seems like public opinion is tilting increasingly on the side of the Palestinians.
I do believe that's true, but there is still a significant minority, and certainly our government and our ministers like Suella Braverman, like Priti Patel, like of course Rishi Sunak, David Lammy, even on the Labour side, and Keir Starmer. They're clearly supporting, I would say, Israel. Now, my point to you is, where do you think? I understand the ally thing and everything else, but the fact that they're not able to passionately and vehemently stand in opposition to the massacre of innocent people being butchered and utter destruction of the Gaza. I'm just wondering, where do you think that's coming from?
I think I think. Can I come in from a different angle? I get really annoyed when people critique Israel and they get told you're racist and you're anti-Semitic. Okay, I'm looking through here to try and find. There's a quote by Ben Shapiro, and I could fact check it, where he specifically says not all critics of Israel are anti-Semitic.
Yeah.
Okay. And before this is out, if I can find the quote in the fact check, I want to give it to people so they can use it in discussions.
Yeah.
So that when they get hit with the idea that you're automatically anti-Semitic just because you're anti-Israel, that doesn't follow according to Ben Shapiro.
Yeah.
Yeah. He then changed his mind 2 years later and whatever. So just as I get annoyed when critiques of Israel sound being anti-Semitic, it's kind of annoying to me as well to assume that any critique I might make of Arabs is because I'm racist either. The racism card feels like...
No, not critiques of Arabs. I'm saying this vehement support that Israel has the right to defend itself, and what Israel is doing is somehow acceptable, because this is what the right-wing media...
but the right-wing media have lost the plot.
American media and a significant minority, I would say, in Europe and in America are also saying this. I'm saying, where is that coming?
I think they're partisan, they're not fair, they're not objective, they're not being ethical, okay?
Because I tell you what...
But there are ethical... My reason for validating Israel really is largely based on the fact they've been there 80 years. They've been there 75 years. It's a new generation of people. Ethics is about you're responsible for your choices. These people didn't choose to get born there. Therefore, they're not responsible for that predicament. They've been born into a predicament, and that earns them a certain amount of kudos, which wouldn't go to the people who generated the Nakba.
No, but I can understand that argument. I can understand.
No, that's not based on
but
any
I'm talking about I'm talking about the significance of what's unfolding now and has been unfolding for the last 75 years, but more significantly from the 7th of October.
Yeah.
I'm saying, why is there not outright condemnation, the cessation of arms, and United Nations, sanctions being, inflicted upon what is a clear breach of international law and the mass killing and destruction of a people, of an ethnic people? I'm saying, where does that come from?
I suspect it comes down to not racism, but a global empathy with the Holocaust, an understanding that the state of the Jews historically really have been scapegoated. They've suffered appallingly, and when they finally, their desire to have a safe haven somewhere, I think we empathise with that impulse. I absolutely agree there should be a state of Israel. It's just if it was 1948, I wouldn't put it there.
Yeah.
I would have said the international community should have found somewhere, and I mean nice.
In Germany.
And safe. No, not Germany. Let's be considerate, okay?
No. I think they should have been given the prime real estate of Germany.
They should have been given a piece of safe, desirable prime real estate by the international community where they would be damn safe.
Yeah, absolutely.
Unfortunately, as a traumatized people, I think they had this historic homing instinct of, well, go back to our roots and all of that, which drew them to Israel. And they got their foot in the door, and because we have empathy with everything that happened to them beforehand, we're turning a bit of a blind eye.
No, but Tony, look, I understand
That's
that.
an honest answer. Is that not a reasonable, partial answer?
No, okay.
It's not the whole thing.
I understand. But I just think that there's a concept of having empathy.
Yeah.
And I have empathy for the Jewish people, because I think what they went through in the Second World War was horrific.
Right.
I don't believe that they have a monopoly on suffering. I think there were many communities, including the Indian community, between 1880 and 1920, that lost 100 million lives, actually. If you Google it, you'll be quite shocked. As much as that.
1880 and 1920?
Between 1880 and 1920. Google it.
Under the British Empire?
Under the British Empire. 100 million Indians.
Well, I condemn it.
No, absolutely. But what I'm saying is that, so we should all condemn what happened to the Jews, what happened to the Indians, what happened. And if there were acts of brutality against Europeans, yes, of course, we should condemn those as well.
Okay.
The point, however, is I can have empathy with them. But if I see in 4K a catalogue of evidence that is actually being shown to me by the very perpetrators of the genocide, of the killing, then I don't believe that the empathy there can overrule.
I don't think the empathy is the only thing. I think it's a multivariance equation, okay? I think another factor is, and I'm not trying to sound anti-Semitic because I'm not, but that the Israeli community has got its hooks more into the power structure of state.
Well, I don't think that's
particularly in America.
Yeah, I mean, they lobby.
Okay,
they lobby our politicians here as well.
Yeah,
and there's no doubt about that.
And I'm not saying I can't understand why that wouldn't happen. You naturally,
if you've got money and you've got influence, you're gonna try to extend your your reach. Of course, you are.
You naturally network with your peer group, and if you're high IQ, etc.
To get your way, to be able to have people on advocates for your cause. I understand.
I mean, also, I think if you feel you're in danger of persecution, it is natural that people stick together in tighter groups and they watch out for
So I would agree
danger.
with you that there are these factors.
That factor, there's other factors.
And I think there is, unfortunately...
hang on, there's another factor you won't like.
Yeah.
Okay. Another factor is, so I think another factor is just, it's happening somewhere else, I've got my life to get on with, and we're not that aware of it in the same way we're not aware of a lot of other problems. Yeah, so we kind of turn a blind eye. And you've understood how people have more empathy for their immediate tribe.
Yeah.
That's not the ideal, though. We should have the empathy. Another factor now that's changing, and I don't think you'll like this, is it's been reframed from a secular conflict, which I think is what it is and it should be, about real estate dispute. And it used to be the PLO. It's been reframed into a religious one. And now that Hamas have taken over and are framing it as a religious thing, and this is not any way a critique of Islam or whether there's a God or anything, it's just mixing apples and pears. It's a political dispute, we should keep it political.
To be honest, I think the late Hamas leader, he said, it's very interesting actually, he said, I have no problem with the Jews.
Okay.
He said, we lived with you for thousands of years, for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
He said, if my own brother was to steal my land, I would fight him.
Fine.
So basically what he said was that if you're unjust to me and you steal from me, I don't care if you're my own brother, I'm going to fight you. So the Jews are my cousins, basically.
Okay.
And if they steal from me, I'm going to fight them. So I think, look, I think fundamentally...
I understand where they'd fight, but it's now being framed in a religious framework.
No,
I try to be, I'm a universalist. I see merit in all religions.
Yeah.
I think when religions are operating moderately, including Islam, they're of great benefit to their advocates, and I respect all of that. Simultaneously, I'm not a fan of extremism, and I'm not a fan of the anti-democratic agenda which exists within some religions, particularly in Islam.
Well, I think...
And I don't want to misrepresent who I am.
Unfortunately, I think that for me, and maybe I'm more sensitive to it being of Asian origin and despite being born here, but Asian origin and being Muslim, is that I see the rhetoric.
Yeah.
I see the propaganda, and I see the comments that people make
Do you see about those three...
about the Palestinian people.
Yeah.
And for me, unfortunately, I think a large part of it is
just racism,
just pure outright racism.
If it is, it is. Okay, so we'll add four things. There's the racism, there's the sympathy factor, there's the it's not in my backyard, what the hell, I've got to get on with my life factor, there's the Jewish influence within the infrastructure, and there is the concern about anti-democratic fundamentalist religions. And that is a legitimate concern. And I don't think it's a completely fatuous one. I think it's a serious consideration.
Well, Tony,
the fact that it's being framed that way, the idea of a Sharia state is anathema to a lot of people. It's fundamentally anti-democratic. And it's a great... the fact that Netanyahu supported Hamas, as I understand.
Yeah, that's right.
He made a tactical decision.
Yeah.
If I have to work with the PLO,
that's right.
I heard in the Dershowitz's debate. Did you watch on Lex Fridman his 5-hour debate?
I think I did.
Okay, right.
No, the 5-hour one.
Oh, go watch. I love Lex Fridman. Okay, he did a 5-hour one with Dershowitz and Benny.
Oh yes. Benny Morris and Alan Dershowitz and Benny Morris and Alan Dershowitz, Norman Finkelstein, and there was somebody with Norman Finkelstein. I can't remember his name.
Who I thought was really great. The guy with Finkelstein I thought was really good.
Yeah.
Anyway, during that, they all seemed to reach a point where they went, there was a really frightening bit, I think, in about the 1990s when they said the Palestinians suddenly did what we called a peace offensive.
Yes, right.
And he said that's when Israel got really scared.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay?
And see, what that tells us, Tony, is that when the PLO, the Palestinian Authority, wanted to explore the road of peaceful settlement, they call it a peace...
Peace offensive.
No, but the point is
great.
They referred to it as that.
Yeah.
And that shows you What that should show you
Yeah.
is that clearly the intention was not to have the peaceful settlement.
Yes, because then you end up with the extremists
Having
like
to make-
Netanyahu.
you have to make concessions.
Trying to stir it up and wanting conflict.
And you don't want
But when they want conflict, what did Netanyahu
exactly.
do?
Yeah,
he decided
so
to back
what-
Hamas
there you go.
because he understands the
That's right.
optics on that. For the
That's
rest
right.
of the international community,
That's right.
is now we're talking about, well, look, we don't like what Israel's doing, but the other guys seem to want to overthrow democracy
right.
itself, and they've got some very barbaric tendencies we disapprove of.
let's support them.
And it's a rock and a hard place.
Well, no, not
Suddenly,
really, not
well,
really.
well,
I don't think it was a rock and a hard place. It was a very tactical decision. They said
Hang on.
if we
No,
got
for us as voters.
Oh, for us voters,
I
okay.
would much rather be
Okay.
backing a secular peace
Yeah,
process
yeah.
than one where, and I come back to, do I want a Sharia state potentially inheriting Israel's nukes, which is, in a one-state solution, one permutation.
well, I
could
think
arise.
you should hope for that. You know why?
Please don't say
I'll tell you
that.
why you should hope for that.
Why should I hope for
Because
that?
in the Sharia, these type of weaponry is not permissible to be used. The deliberate targeting of innocent people is
But-
not permissible in
Yeah,
Islam.
But you have to decide who's innocent.
So no, innocent non-combatants. So deliberate targeting of non-combatants in Islam is haram, is forbidden.
So, no, are you saying that no Muslim state would ever fire a nuclear weapon because it would automatically hit civilians?
I'm
Really?
saying that they're not permitted to use those weapons
Okay.
where it would overwhelmingly affect and overwhelmingly kill
We hate the small print.
no. Because if you said
Overwhelmingly.
because if you said, for example, let's okay, let me give you the hypothetical. You have an island, and on the island you have 95% of the people are military. It's a military base, and you may have some civilians there.
Yeah.
That would be a different situation.
Yeah, so where are you drawing
To-
the percentages? Where?
Well, overwhelming. So that would
more
be
than 50%.
No, so it may be even much higher than that.
Okay.
So if that's the case,
Those kind of weapons
are not
are off
permissible.
limits.
So actually, the Sharia
But-
would not permit you to
Okay,
use
but
that.
Iran would seem to have an aspiration for nuclear weapons.
Well, look,
and Iran would seem to have a
first of all,
stated agenda
look,
to
first
take
of
down
all,
Israel.
first of all, that's another discussion.
Actually, no, it's totally affiliated.
No, but hold on a second. Look, the whole point here is that if Iran ever acquired nuclear weapons,
Uh-huh.
if Iran ever used a nuclear weapon against Israel,
They'd be fucked.
we know, you know, I know,
Yeah.
the world knows that there would just be a crater left of what was Iran. Okay?
I do believe
it
that's
would
the
be
case, yeah.
self-annihilation.
Yeah.
So the reality is, this concept that we're being programmed to
But-
think
but-
that Iran wants to get nuclear weapons because it wants to destroy Israel is nonsense.
But if I'm
But-
Israeli, I'm going, yeah, but the problem is, Iran is a theocracy, and these guys, they're not worried about the material survival. What they're worried about
Yeah,
is their
but-
eternal survival of the
Yeah,
soul.
but, you know-
and if they think it's divine
I know.
covenant that they're supposed to do it,
I know, but unfortunately-
and there will be people who might, and
but-
that's a legitimate
and
concern.
Unfortunately,
That's a legitimate concern.
unfortunately, Israel believes all sorts of things.
Well, hang on.
to carry out
okay,
its
I consider myself, try to be objective. I would be concerned as well that somebody who is theocratic and who is more interested in the afterlife, yeah, and who these ideas about Armageddon and so on are just fulfilling biblical prophecies and whatever, and they exist in the Christian corner and the Zionist corner as well. People who are merging all of this with some apocalyptic
Well, what I would argue-
I don't want those guys to have their fingers on nuclear
Well,
weapons.
actually, what I would argue is that a people who actually follow the faith of Islam are less likely to use nuclear weapons and are less likely to retaliate with nuclear weapons. Because in Islam, an injustice that is done upon you cannot be returned by an injustice against the other people.
I would hope you're right.
At that point, we leave it up to Allah. So actually, the reality is that the person following the Sharia is less likely to use them and less likely to retaliate with them. But Tony, we've had a long discussion.
Okay, are you tired? I am
I'm tired and I have to pray.
It's been.
I have to pray.
It's always a pleasure.
It's always nice to speak
It's
to you.
really nice to actually have a chat.
It's always
and
nice
we-
to speak to you.
Definitely.
And I think we both
It's
go
good
away
to see you down
learning
here
a little
again.
bit more about each other and our
Yeah.
views.
Yeah, this was really cool.
Nice
Lovely
to
see
speak to you. Nice to meet you.
you. Again.
Tony,
Take care.
have a good one.